This tutorial is going to take us through section 9.5, colliding with asteroids. And on this particular one, we are going to follow pretty closely to the textbook's directions. And so I will rely pretty heavily upon it. And so right now, we want to place an explosion into the world and show the effect when the rocket actually hits an asteroid. Our pseudocode would look something like this. And the more of this type of a pseudocode you can provide with your semester project proposal, the better off or quicker you're going to be able to complete your proposal or your project. But when we collide with an asteroid, we're going to explode, we're going to remove the rocket, and we're going to show a final game score. We are not going to look at the final game score right now in this video, but we are going to look at the explosion and removing the rocket. So the first thing they want us to do is to create a new method with an empty body in the rocket class, and it's going to be called check collision. This method will be private and needs no return value and no parameters. Then in the act method, we're going to call a method call or put a method call to check collision. So if we go back to the rocket class, I've already written in the method call, so I'm going to just comment that out. We're going to call check collision. And just as a reminder, it's always a good idea to reformat your code every once in a while. And you can use edit, auto layout, or use the Control-Shift-I. And it just cleans up your code for you. And you should do that regularly if you have not been doing that. And the method that they want us to write is check collision. And I've already actually written one, but I'm going to write this one with you. So it wants to be a private method, no return value, no method parameters. So it's just check collision as this. And we have an empty method. And we should always comment the method. And so the method is going to be, we'll check to see if a asteroid collides with the rocket. It will place an explosion if there is a collision, and it will remove the rocket from the world. So it has several things that it's going to do. Next, we want to look at the documentation of the actor class and write down all the methods related to collision and write down methods about whether objects are nearby. You don't have to do that, but let's just glance at it here. And in the actor class, we have lots of collisions or intersection methods. There's get intersecting object, and it brings in a class object. There's get neighbors, get objects at offset, get objects in a range, and that would be in a range. It looks like it's like within a certain range of a circle because it says there's a radius. Get one intersecting object, get one object at offset, and there's intersects, is touching. So there's quite a few that relate to whether objects are intersecting or not. And your textbook also goes in and talks a little bit about how intersections are determined. Right now it's fairly rough, meaning this. All images in Greenfoot are set inside a bounding box. And so the image that we see is this, but there's actually this box around it, and it's transparent, so you can't see the box except for the image. And if as soon as two images intersect, like right here, then the code determines that as touching, even though if you look at the picture, the rocket and the asteroid aren't touching at all. So there are some more sophisticated ways to kind of go about determining whether the objects are touching and such. We are not going to deal with them at this point, but just know that there are some that you could use. One of the methods that we looked at is going to use get intersecting objects and get one intersecting objects, and one of those returns an actor, and one of them returns a list. And right now we are just looking at the rocket, so we're going to be using the actor one and get one intersecting object. This is one where it might take a little bit. It took me about 3 times to type it correctly, but our code's going to look something like this. And actually, let's jump back to the other screen so you can start typing this code. And our code is going to look like the following. We are going to get an asteroid called A that is intersecting with, and I actually have to cast this as an asteroid, I believe, because we don't know what intersecting object it is for sure. Well, actually we do. We know it's a asteroid. I meant to say that the get one intersecting object method works on several different actors, and so we have to tell it which one we're working with. And since we are working with an asteroid, we have to do what's called casting. I'm just double checking my code. Casting means it's going to get the intersecting object from the asteroid class, and then it's going to get intersecting object returns an actor. If I go back here, and an actor is generic. We want the more specific actor. That's an asteroid. So I have to use this casting operator to tell my program that I actually have an asteroid. If I didn't use that casting operator, then I would have a generic actor, which is not what I want at this time. I want to have this specific asteroid. The next thing that we're going to do, we're going to check to see if that is not null. And that is going to check to see if an object actually exists. So when an object doesn't exist, it has a value called null, or basically it's non-existent. So if it's not null, that means that an object exists. And we've got an asteroid. And so when we check to see if that object exists, then that's when we're going to use the following pseudocode. We're going to get the current world, remove the object, and then add an object. So we're going to add an explosion and remove the current spaceship. So we're just going to type those 3 lines of code, and it's going to look like the following. We are going to get the current world that we're working in, and we can do that by doing get world. We are going to remove an object, and then we're going to place an explosion. I kind of want to see if this works as it is right now though. So I'm going to compile this, and I'm just going to see if I run into, or if an asteroid runs into me, if it removes the ship. And it did. So the remove ship seems to be working. And so let's go back to our code. We just then need to place the explosion. To place the explosion, we're going to do world.addObject, new explosion at the current X and Y location. Now it's getting the X and Y location of this rocket. So that get X, get Y is going to be dependent upon that rocket. So if we compile, and if we run the code again, I have a parentheses error. Fix that, compile the code again, and run, and we will see if we can get an explosion. So I'm just going to wait to see if I can actually run into an asteroid. I'm really bad at playing games, so you guys will laugh at me. Maybe I'll just let it drift. See if we run into an asteroid. I'm having very bad luck. Okay, it hit, it removed, we didn't see the explosion, and I got an error message. This error message that comes up says actor not in world. An attempt was made to use the actor's location while it is not in the world. And then it throws this funky error message here, illegal state exception. It tells you what line of code that's occurring at. It says it's occurring in the act method at line 35 and the check collision at line 70. So if I go back to my code, And if you didn't know how to turn the line numbers on, you can always do that under Preferences, I believe, and Display Line Numbers. So it's always a good thing to be able to look at the line numbers. Let me clean up the windows here just a little bit so we can look at this. And so what's happening is I'm actually trying to access the X and Y location of the rocket that I just removed. And so it throws that error. So what we need to do is cut this line of code, which is Control X, and paste it, Control V, before the world remove object. And then I can auto layout, so it'll fix my indenting and everything for me, compile the code, and let's see if it'll run again. This time, let's see if I can place my spaceship so it's going to get an explosion right away. There's the explosion and the spaceship disappeared. And so that correctly executed the code, and we have destroyed the spaceship. And I believe that's it. The last thing I will mention, though, is your textbook has a link to some other, if you want to get more complicated or more realistic, there's a whole link on creating explosions, and you can reference that in your textbook.